I'm Jody.
And I'm Richard.
And you're watching Beargrass Thunder. So we are here in a native pollinator yarden that
once was a native pollinator yarden.
Yes, it is now completely destroyed because of a miscommunication. So this happens more than people like to talk about because a lot of times native plants look a lot like weeds. And so what do you do when your garden gets completely erased? So, we're here to talk about it.
And we're just going to take you along for the ride.
So this is a newly clear yarden, and it's the end of June. It's starting to get hot in Kentucky, which means that the plants that we would just put back in the ground, it's starting to get too hot to even try that right now. So there is a few things and few tips and tricks that we have to make sure that the soil doesn't get too baked with all of the plant life gone. So number one thing that we did was, once all the plant life was gone, we came in here with as much mulch as we could. And so the mulch, this is kind of a double whammy, because not only do you protect the existing soil from the ultraviolet radiation, but you also, whenever it rains, this mulch helps to trap as much water as you can onto the top of the soil. And so that kind of combination of shade and water makes for seeds to start germinating, and it also helps to insulate the existing plant life. So around here we see all these weird funny shaped leaves. They're all zigzaggy, they have a lot of tooths on the leaves, and from looking at this I'm assuming that these are all dandelions. And most of the time people are like, "Oh, Jody, a dandelion, why do you want a dandelion?" Well, honestly, a dandelion is a survivor of the plant. It has a really deep taproot, it can grow in almost any condition, and they're also one of the first plants to come back in a disturbed site. So by having the dandelions here, we are probably not going to have these long term, but any plant life we have now, I can literally just take these leaves once they get a little bit bigger, put them on the ground, and that helps to shade the soil. So anything we have is actually beneficial, especially when the entire yard gets cleared overnight. So moving on, we see a few more dandelion here. This is more what I'm talking about. This is only a couple days of growth, and it came back heavy once the mulch was put down. We got a little flower here, a little dandelion flower that's gonna bloom, but anything that you see here, like if you don't want a dandelion or you're just not a fan, you can just take these leaves. This is called chop and drop. You just chop the leaves and drop them where you want shade in your soil. We also are fortunate enough to have a wonderfully big cottonwood tree in the background here, and whenever it gets too windy, it's going to lose its leaves. So cottonwood trees, they have pretty big leaves, and again, just put them on the soil where you want. So what we did in the meantime was we took all of the greenery that was chopped down and we tried our best to mulch this space. So again, we didn't seed any of this yet. This is just literally using what was waxed to cover and shade, because the number one thing you need for soil is shade. The second best thing you need is water. And with summer almost upon us, well actually it's past June 21st, so summer is here, it's going to get really, really hot really, really fast. So moving on here, we were fortunate enough to have Reseed Native Plant Nursery out in Clarksville, Indiana, donate some starts once they heard that our production space got weed whacked. So these are some of the plants that they donated, and so really excited because we have a lot of really cool species like grass-leaved goldenrod over here. We have white vervain, white snakeroot. We have a few other species of coneflower, like yellow coneflower here. And number one question I get is, Jody, well, this doesn't look very healthy. It's on the ground like this. And that's because, one, it's newly transplanted, but two, when it's really hot, the leaves do not do as well. And so they actually kind of slump over just to retain some water. So if your leaves are slumping, one of the easiest things you can do to make sure that the plant survives is just take off half the leaves. And so when you do that, not only do you decrease the amount of transpiration that occurs or water that's leaving the plant, but you also keep the plant from exuding so much energy trying to grow all the leaves. It'll only put its growth back into certain ones. When you're transplanting the flowers, especially during the heat, you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly and with as little shock to the plant as you can. A few other things that we have here are what look like sticks. And these are just green sticks. What they actually are the plants that were weed whacked. What we found was that the gardener who weed whacked actually not only weed whacked the plants but tore them all up at the roots and threw them in the garbage. So we went garbage can to find the plants, put them in a bucket to rehydrate, and then I buried the roots in the ground. So they will not grow back 100% this year. It's already halfway through the growing season. It's not going to happen. But what we really hope that will happen is that the roots will stay in the ground all year, and then hopefully next spring they're going to come back just as much. Whenever you can, just make sure to leave the roots intact. If you're weed whacking or someone's mowing, just remember that as long as the roots are in the ground, they're probably going to grow. Just a matter of keeping that blade and keeping the weed whackers away from wherever you're trying to grow into flower. Because these that will come back will probably miss the flowering cycle. They're just focused on actually surviving. You know, I'm not gonna lie, this is a big shock to any gardener to have their entire garden completely destroyed. It's a lot to work through, and you have to do a lot of damage control before you can even think about putting in new plants. But again, start with mulch, get that shade on the soil, put some water into the soil once you have it mulched, so that mulch can trap that water on top of the soil, maybe germinate the seeds or at least help the existing plants. And then once you have the surface mulched, then you can start digging some holes and putting in some native plant starts, as well as anything you find that still has roots. Again, the roots are the most important thing, because over time they're going to grow together and help out each other. And the more biodiversity you have in a garden, the better off you actually are. And so native plants have a few tips and tricks that you can learn. One is that native plant starts will never get big usually the first year. Native plants especially have this saying, the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, the third year they leap. So the first year they're focused on root production. They're not really going to have a lot above ground. Second year they're going to start putting out a few more shoots, maybe put out a few more flowers, but again, focused on building that root production. Third year they're done with the root production, they're ready to soar. And once you have a bunch of different plants planted within a relatively small area, you're gonna have a gorgeous prairie in just a few years. Especially if, like us, they ripped out all the turf grass too. So with that being said, you know, again, thank you so much for watching. We really hope to show you the updates as we go on. And again, you know, this could happen to anybody. And so by watching these videos, we really hope that you can learn a few tips and tricks to make sure that your yarden stays intact. Be sure to like and subscribe our videos, and check out our Patreon, www.patreon.com/beargrassthunder.